Just going to get started for the sake of time. So without further ado, I'm really excited to be here, thanks to Stewardship Partners. My name is Angela Enna. I am a Clean Water Project Manager at the Environmental Coalition of South Seattle. Shout out to my group there. Hi. I work on various green stormwater infrastructure projects in the Duwamish Valley using an urban ecological approach. I grew up between Beacon Hill, Seattle and Anaheim, California, and I'm very pleased to be here, as I said. I'm excited to announce our first speaker, Karen DeNicola. She is a retired hydrologist, engineer, and policy lead who dedicated more than 20 years of her career in the water quality program at the Washington State Department of Ecology to developing and improving stormwater management and permitting approaches based on robust and targeted science. She lives in Tacoma. Sharon Leishman, a local who grew up in the region. Sharon has 30+ years of corporate management leadership experience in the high-tech industry. In 2012, she revived her childhood love of nature by volunteering along the Duwamish River, becoming her passion with people for Puget Sound, and was later asked to lead the Duwamish Alive Coalition. Our next speaker, Joy Okazaki, is a founding board member of the Kubota Garden Foundation, the nonprofit that supports Kubota Garden after the city of Seattle purchased the garden from the Kubota family in 1987. The foundation has a 30+ year partnership with Seattle Parks, runs a variety of programs and events at the garden, and is a constant community focus on the garden in a changing city environment. Larry Hubble is a wildlife photojournalist who focuses on nature in the city. In 2017, Larry's focus on nature in the city led to the co-founding of Friends of Arboretum Creek with his friend Dave Galvin. The mission of their work is to maximize the diversity of life in Arboretum Creek while rekindling the love affair between Seattleites and nature. Shelley Basketfield is a project engineer. That stands for? Okay, great. Manages Seattle Public Utilities Source Reduction Program section, which includes the Rain City Partnerships Program, a community-based public-private partnership, and the Street Sweeping for Water Quality Program, a partnership with the Seattle Department of Transportation. She brings an operation-based continuous improvement approach to her work, gained through public and private sector experience as a practicing professional engineer. And finally, Pam Emerson has worked as a green infrastructure planner and policy advisor with Seattle Public Utilities since 2011. She worked previously with the City of Seattle's Office of Sustainability and Environment on Seattle's first climate action plan and at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, leading regional programs to promote children's environmental health and accelerate environmental education and literacy. I'm going to hand this over to Karen and get this panel started.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you all for inviting me to come here today. My colleagues on this panel asked me to provide some context around where we are on the trajectory, the evolution, the implementation of stormwater management, which is a relatively new function of public utilities here in Western Washington. Yes, stormwater management is quite new. As a viable professional field, stormwater is less than about 15 years old. And as a public utility function, it is still solidly rooted in engineering approaches and built solutions, and more than a little bit paternalistic. But as a collective, we're learning and evolving and improving our approaches while we are taking action. The founders of this summit had a vision that more nature-based solutions can and should be applied in our urban landscapes. They knew and understood that community members see problems in their neighborhoods. They see too little water, too much water, poor water quality. My fellow panelists will share stories of helping citizens groups secure resources and lead the way to address these problems. But first, one of the conference organizers, Angela, specifically asked me to talk to you today about biophilic design. What is, oh, my slide is not, sorry. There we go. What is biophilic design? To quote Wikipedia, Biophilic design is a concept used in the building industry to increase occupant connectivity to the natural environment through the use of direct nature, indirect nature, and space and place conditions. Used at both the building and city scale, this idea has health, environmental, and economic benefits for building occupants and urban environments with few drawbacks. Although its name was coined in recent history, examples of biophilic design and architecture have been seen as far back as the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I want you all to close your eyes and imagine the concrete jungle given over to hanging gardens. So here we are in 2023 with way too much of our urban landscape completely given over to car habitat, with roads and parking lots everywhere and no space for vegetation except for some scrawny street trees that are boxed in by grates and surrounded by concrete and struggling to survive. I live in Tacoma, the traditional hunting grounds of the Puyallup and Muckleshoot and Nisqually and Squaxin tribes, also used by many other tribes of the Salish Sea. Our tree canopy has now fallen below 20%. It is the lowest coverage of any jurisdiction in our region. And it is achieved only by including Point Defiance Park and undeveloped gulches. Tacoma has no tree retention ordinance and no setback requirements for new buildings to provide any space for vegetation. The new zoning recently adopted aims to replace modest homes and tree-filled yards with corner-to-corner apartment complexes. This is short-sighted. It will exacerbate urban heat island effects that are getting worse with climate change. I am here to challenge any city's policy statement that setbacks and green space don't pencil out for developers. Increasing housing supply and improving citizens' quality of life is not a zero-sum game. Residential neighborhoods do not need to be reduced to concrete jungles. We need to repair our connection to nature with forward thinking and a vision rooted in biophilic design principles for all of our neighborhoods. No person should live in a sacrifice zone. Enough already. Pay close attention to the space between the building and the sidewalk and between the sidewalk and the street. I'd love to see a model ordinance to show how there can be code requirements to green this space up. Be more creative, add some curves, and make it a pleasant stroll to the nearest park. I am going to pass the mic to the next presenter, but happy to talk more through the day.
Thank you, Karen. I'm Sharon Lishman. I manage the Duwamish Alive Coalition, which is a coalition of agencies, nonprofits, and community groups. Am I up? Okay. We work within the Duwamish watershed. Obviously, the river is kind of our soul, but we are throughout the whole watershed. And our coalition is, the primary partner in the restoration of Rocks Hill Bog, which is in Southwest Seattle, Rocks Hill Park. It's the headwaters of Longfellow Creek and the primary place for neighbors of one of Seattle's most underserved communities of diversity with which to experience nature. Over the years, the peat wetland has been drying to the extent of almost total loss of its wetland ecosystem. This is a decade-long community-driven project started by two neighbors, Rory Denovan and Scott Blackstock, concerned about the ecological changes from the loss of water in the wetland, and asked three simple questions 10 years ago. Where's the water? Why is it not here? And what do we do to restore it? Since that time, the complexity of the project has grown, so has our community of partners in restoring one of Seattle's last peat wetlands with this unique technical approach by Natural Systems Design. And so the logos you see here are primary partners, but it by no means represents all the partners we're working with. So now that the extensive research and the resulting unique design method has been completed by Natural Systems Design, we're in the permitting phase of constructing the test pilot in the wetland. Our funding has come from King County, Rose Foundation, and Boeing. So, let's see. Okay. So the key successes of this complex community-driven project are in developing collaborative strategic partnerships at the right times as the project progresses. And this requires basically, first identifying your project's goals and priorities, strengths and weaknesses. And this is especially important because most community-driven projects are very limited resources. And then once these are identified, then identify your needs and prioritize them, because this will help you identify strategic partnerships and relationships to build both within and without your community. And for us, when we did this analysis, the obvious first partnerships were with Natural Systems Design, which is their team has an extensive experience in wetland restoration, but also working within Seattle and within the Puget Sound region. The other obvious one was with Seattle Park, since the bog is within the park system, and we already had built relationships with them. The one that was really not obvious, and when I suggested it, I got a lot of raised eyebrows, was to partner with American Rivers, which American Rivers, this is not their typical project, but we had many things in common when we talked with them. So they were interested in becoming involved in an urban project that was away from the river and in a community of diversity. And for us, they brought tremendous amount of resources in perspective, and also in just knowledge of working with agencies. So the best I can suggest is really look beyond the obvious. And to do this also, have a compelling story. Know your potential partner, what their goals are, what their needs are, what their plans for the future are, so that you can find those areas of mutual benefit. And lastly, develop project champions, because as a community project, you're not going to be everywhere all at once. So have people within agencies, within nonprofits, out in the community that can champion your project, answer questions, and be that kind of that liaison. And for us, we have the 3 Ps of community projects, which is patience, persistence, and above all, passion. So we acknowledge we stand on the shoulders of all that have come before us, but we're also really responsible for those in the future. So, to move the dial, we really need to be collaborative and work together.
Hello? Okay. Good morning. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. Good morning. I'm Joy Okazaki. I'm the board president of the Kubota Garden Foundation. I'm trying to do a juggling act here with visuals and speaking into a mic and reading, so I stay within my time, so bear with me. Kubota Garden is a gorgeous 20-acre Japanese garden surrounded by 18 acres of natural space in the Rainier Beach neighborhood of Southeast Seattle. Mapes Creek flows through Kubota Garden north to Beersheba Park on Lake Washington, where it provides habitat for migrating salmon. During rain events, one can't help but notice the muddy ponds, which need to be dredged every few years to maintain water flow. What is the source of the silt? Where is it coming from? Is it harmful to the koi? How do we find out? Kubota Garden Foundation has been organized since 1989 and has been a partner with Seattle Parks for over 30 years. As such, we've kept a community focus on the garden, and we've had over 200 active volunteers in recent years that have not only helped with garden maintenance, but also managed programs, events, and supported capital projects. We have a garden committee shown here, comprised of foundation board members, community members, design professionals, Seattle Parks gardeners and project management staff, who all advise on and guide the improvements for this community space. In 2019, Kubota Garden Foundation and Seattle Parks did a master plan update and asked some of these questions. We determined that in order to solve the problem, we needed to understand it better. The master plan update identified the improvements to stormwater as a high priority. Yet there was no funding for a study at Kubota Garden identified in the Seattle Parks budget. There was also a suspicion that the problem was coming from the adjacent 55th Avenue South. But again, nothing in the Seattle Department of Transportation or Seattle Public Utility budgets to figure it out. So the foundation went on a journey looking for grants to fund such a study. I just happened to receive an email from Ken Pritchard at the time from King County Department of Natural Resources talking about the upcoming Waterworks grant. We also applied for a Move Seattle levy-funded Neighborhood Street Fund grant to make safety and stormwater improvements to 55th Avenue South as it fronts on the east side of Kubota Garden. While we didn't get the Waterworks grant, as Elizabeth knows, through the juried process, we were told there was an alternative way to potentially get funding. So we went through the council process, and we were able to get Councilmember Larry Gossett at the time, who was busy campaigning feverishly, to recommend funding, and we were fully funded. Similarly, despite the high community support for our Neighborhood Street Fund grant proposal, we didn't get funding in the initial round. So we waited 3 years, and we were ranked high enough in that initial round to get funded in the second cycle 3 years later in 2022. The King County Waterworks grant funded our stormwater study, and we hired a team led by Walker Macy Landscape Architects, MKA, and Aspect Consulting to help us. We wanted to understand how the surrounding neighborhood and development affected the ponds and ultimately Mapes Creek. We engaged Seattle Parks, SDOT, and SPU so that they could help inform the study and we could inform them of the findings. We were surprised to learn that the majority of the flows into the creek are from non-roadway runoff. Even though you can see water coming down this street, the hillside to the south, we found that the stormwater runs through an open drainage ditch in the upper reaches of Mapes Creek Basin. along the east side of 55th Avenue South, which is on the left side of this photo of the road, and then runs into Kubota Gardens parking lot, and then into a small bioswale and ponds of Kubota Garden, which are part of Mapes Creek. We also learned that the unpaved maintenance yard and miles of trails in the garden, which are unpaved, are large contributors to the muddy ponds. So our study showed that the solutions need to focus on reducing and eliminating those conditions that cause extreme turbidity, silt and sedimentation in the ponds at the Kubota Garden, while maintaining flows into Mapes Creek. So how do we share this information and start the conversation on stormwater infrastructure and its relationship to the local residents, Kubota Gardens, and the Mapes Creek Basin? Kubota Garden received more visitors in 2021, over 126,000, more than any other year that we've recorded attendance, despite, or maybe perhaps due to the COVID pandemic. This was a project that we undertook during the pandemic, the stormwater study. So we were forced to go to online and hold outreach meetings and feedback and provide updates and share progress through a story map, which was hosted by Aspect Consulting. While we did receive some feedback, we weren't sure that we really had reached the immediate neighbors across the street or uphill to the south. We had also applied for a third grant to do outreach in the local community to share our findings, but it wasn't funded. So the foundation did the old-fashioned visitor engagement, which allowed us to invite those local neighbors specifically, and also to engage people that came to the garden on a sunny fall weekend. So this was our way of telling them about what we're learning, telling them about the larger problem, and telling them about the impacts and the improvements. So while we were hugely successful in getting these pieces of the puzzle funded, it makes us wonder how access to funding for community-based projects could be improved. After all, the studies and designs are merely a drop in the bucket compared to the implementation, both financially and in terms of time. How do communities like Rainier Beach Skyway, identified as under-resourced in open park space, according to both Seattle's Environmental Equity Initiative, the Race and Social Justice Initiative, and King County's Equity and Social Justice Strategic Plan, how do they figure out how to get access to funding to improve parks and natural resources? Kubota Garden is fortunate to have built up a wonderful following and has had 30+ years of advocacy as a partner group. We've had angels that have joined the foundation in its commitment to support both the garden financially as well as with volunteers. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Larry Hubble, and I have got the slides going the wrong direction. To the right. Oh, past the blank. Okay, I did it. Thank you. Where to start? In 2011, the mate to this bald eagle was someone you've probably heard of called Eddie the Eagle. And he was hit by the bus on 520 and didn't make it. And that was about the time I started paying attention to nature and birds in Union Bay. And I started watching his mate, I call her Ava, on the nest. And within a month, she took a new mate. In the next spring, they had young. And I wrote a post for the blog, Union Bay Watch, which was titled Life After Eddie. And it's out there if you want to go look at it. But it got me focused on the eagles. And I had visited other places where I've seen a lot more eagles. And I started to wonder, why is it around Husky Stadium that we only had 2 pairs of bald eagles that were residential? And I came to the conclusion that it had to do with the amount of fish, that we don't have the fish that we should have in Union Bay. And that's why we don't have as many eagles as we could have. And over time, I spent more time studying birds and learning and joined the master birder class where I met Dave Galvin, my partner, in this Friends of Arboretum Creek. And I'm telling him, you know, if that creek had more water and if it was accessible for fish, we'd have more birds here. And I explained, you know, my thoughts about it. And little did I know that Dave had 40 years of working with King County, has worked with water. He understood all of these things that I don't know anything about. And he turns to me and he goes, let's do it. And so that was the start of Friends of Arboretum Creek. And we faced a number of issues: funding, diverse stakeholders, public messaging, team building, COVID, and how to handle things like accounting and contracts. And our project is, I'll start with the land recognition. We, the Friends of Arboretum Creek, seek to honor the Coast Salish people on whose land we live by reconnecting ancient flows and restoring native life forms in the Arboretum Creek ecosystem. So when we started out, we were talking about, oops, go back, I want to. We're talking about the water flows here that are uphill above the Japanese gardens, and they currently go into the King County sewer system. It's clean water. We tested it. There's no reason for it to be in the sewer system. It takes up capacity that should be used for water that needs to be treated. And it no longer flows to Arboretum Creek, which has currently been reduced to just the outflow from the Japanese garden ponds. And in hot weather, that runs dry and the creek has no flow. So we started working on this project in 2017. We talk about complexities of who you work with. We, on our advisory group that meets once every quarter, we have representatives from the Seattle Parks and Recreation, the Arboretum Foundation, the University of Washington Botanic Gardens, King County Wastewater, Seattle Public Utility, the Seattle Department of Transportation, and our fiscal sponsor, Seattle Parks. They're all involved. The top 3 are the master implementation group for the Arboretum, which is where our treatment stormwater garden will reside. So they have meetings once a month, and we've been going to those maybe once a year to explain where our project is and what we're working on. But we have to get input from all 3 of those organizations, and they don't necessarily agree on everything. They have to work it out. And so Parks is the primary landowner. The Arboretum Foundation is a fundraiser for it, the Arboretum, and the University of Washington Gardens, it says collections owner. That means they own the trees. And so there's very interesting dynamics in working all that out and in trying to understand how our stormwater garden can meet the needs of all these different organizations and groups. King County, of course, gets the benefit if we can remove that water from the sewage system. And King County Waterworks has been a major funder for us. And we've also received funding through King County Flood Control. We used one of our grants that Dave secured from Seattle Neighborhood Matching Fund to create this graphic, which if you go to our arboretumcreek.org, it's interactive and it allows you to see a vision of how we think it could be in the future. And you can click on various plants, trees, birds, insects here and get information about how they interact. What was a big surprise for me, and I had no clue when I was going into this, and I probably know less about stormwater than anybody here, but In 2001, in December, there was a storm and it rushed over down the hillside, basically covering almost the exact same area as what we were planning to do with the piping to connect these uphill streams with the creek. And if I could play this, this would be the video of the flood. But I don't think I can figure out how to do it from here today. One more time on what? Forward? Oh, thank you. I'm learning all the time. I won't play the whole thing, but this is the parking lot to the Japanese garden. This is the sidewalk. And now we're turning and we're looking at the entrance to the garden, right where it's all paved right in front of the garden. And I won't go through the whole thing, but this water is about 8 inches deep here. And it's flooding all of the buildings about 1 inch deep. And this graphic video of it, you can see my boot how deep the water is, really was critical to showing that we had a need for floodwater control. And so sorry about the noise of that, but let's go back here for a second. So that's basically all this red area is flooded area in this map. And what you just saw was the big piece of the parking lot and then going into the Japanese garden. And of course, when it floods like that off the roadway, it's pulling in all the road pollutants, putting them in the garden pond. And so you can see there's a huge need here. And this is our map at 10% design. At this point, we were thinking still about the idea of running water through the Japanese garden pond, but the master plan implementation group talked to us and said, no, we don't want to have any chance of stormwater and pollutant coming through the pond. So they kind of rejected that portion of the plan. The benefits of what we're trying to do is clean water in the creek, adding native plants and trees and supporting them in the creek with the water, protecting the Japanese garden and the neighborhood from flooding, removing pollutants from the watershed, and increasing capacity in the King County sewer. And through our relationship with Jacobs Engineering, who's been doing all of our design work, we passed 30% design last summer. We anticipate hitting 60% this year. And I won't show you all these technical plans because it's way over my head and I couldn't explain them. But this graphic, my little cartoon, kind of shows you where we're at 30% design. And we planned the green structure on the right-hand side over there is the underground piping that will go around the Japanese garden. And our new stormwater project, stormwater garden, will be right at the headwaters. And hopefully we would love to have it all planted with native plants, but we'll have to see what the master plan implementation group and everybody agrees to. But it needs to be a garden that both treats the water and provides the visual that fits with the Arboretum. We're very happy that through Seattle Public Utility, Catherine Lynch has worked with us. She worked on the Thornton Creek project and talked about teaching us about hyporheic treatment of water. And we're hoping to have that integrated into this garden such that it will never require underground maintenance. It will function going forward in a very sustainable fashion. Now I'll skip this part. And what has worked for us so far is using the website to share the vision. We're doing monthly nature walks. We're doing public project tours. We've had community meetings. We're doing team building. We're doing work parties. We have people that work on educational outreach. Our walks are about both nature, water, and birds. And I think it's critical when you're working with other people that want to come and donate time to your project to look for the spark. It's like when I mentioned this first idea to Dave, he comes back with, let's do it. And it was the spark, that energy, that devotion to water quality that he had that I didn't even know about. And other people have had sparks about education and outreach and birds. So just look for that spark in people. That's the critical. Then they're willing to, really help you out, help the project. On the shareholder communications, we just have to listen. There's so much going on that we don't know about. Funding, we're only at 50% through, but we have funding through King County primarily for 100% of the design. So we should get that in about, get to that point in 2 years. Mainly, it's just keep trying. If we don't quit, we're not going to fail. And thank you to Seattle Parks Foundation, which has been essential in addressing things that we don't have the skill set to do. They've been our fiscal sponsor and help us with contracts and all of that. Thank you.
That was great, Larry. Glad to learn about that. Good morning, everyone. Pam Emerson and Shelley Basketfield with you from Seattle Public Utilities. We're here to talk about a new program we're about to launch. But before we get into that content, we also wanted to take a moment to pause and honor this particular place that you see up on the slide. This is Nuknu, as I understand it, in Lishitsi, meaning place of gathering waters, a place stewarded by Coast Salish people since time immemorial, that we now also know in English as the Cedar River watershed. This is a protected watershed, and together with the Tolt watershed is the primary source of drinking water for much of the greater Seattle area, including the city of Bothell. So if you're drinking tap water, you're drinking water from this place. And this place, of course, is still actively stewarded by Coast Salish peoples today, together with Seattle Public Utilities and many other beings, human and non-human. So I just wanted to take a moment, invite us to pause and honor this place and its people. Shelley and I are here primarily to introduce a new $15 million funding program for green infrastructure retrofits in Seattle, community-driven green infrastructure retrofits in Seattle called Rain City. That's the new program that we'll launch with our program manager partner a little bit later this year. Rain City is a pilot of the broader Shape Our Water planning process. So we wanted to take just 1 minute to tell you about that, because community is really at the heart of both the Shape Our Water process and the Rain City program. So Shape Our Water is SPU's 50-year planning process for water resiliency in Seattle. Last year, we completed a major milestone in this process, a robust engagement effort during the pandemic that produced our community vision, essentially our marching orders from our community for our next 50 years of investment. And not surprisingly, our communities want to see our work support holistic community health, forward-thinking resilience investments for a climate-altered future, and multi-benefit projects and programs really driven by community-centered partnerships. So Rain City was developed to respond to this vision that was directed toward us by our community, shared with us by our community, and particularly the delivery of multi-benefit investment and community-driven partnerships. So in the early stages of program development, we also partnered with community-based organizations, specifically in Seattle and Seattle's Environmental Justice Committee, to set even more specific direction for this particular funding program. And we want to share just a few of the things we heard. We heard to not use a structure that replicates inherently competitive and unjust funding structures that are out there. No shade to grant programs, but the organizations that we spoke with did advise us to not pursue a grant structure. Also to keep jobs in the community and prioritize resourcing of our BIPOC-led organizations and small businesses, and to include structures that support mentorship and on-the-job training. It's not on the slide, but we also did hear from our communities that connection to our local water bodies, and particularly our creeks, was something that they wanted to see in the program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shelley for just some more specifics.
Thank you, Pam. So we're running a little behind. I had 3 slides with a lot of more details about the program, so I'm going to just go through really quickly because we actually have one more speaker. And we're hosting a table, a challenge table. So please come and join us to get more details, ask more questions, understand how we did this. Anything you want to know about the vision, Pam has it. So really quickly in a nutshell, we're making progress with green stormwater in GSI in Seattle, but we wanted to do better. So how can we deliver more GSI faster, more efficiently with more benefits? And how can we increase participation, especially among people who maybe don't have the time or the money? So a community-based public-private partnership, or CBP3, is what we're planning to do with our Rain City program. So you can see oh, wrong button, sorry. Okay, maybe you can't see the top button up there where it talks about SPU. As the local government, our role is to work with community to find out what their goals and objectives are and set the performance requirements for the program. We also provide the funding and oversight of the program. Our private entity in the button that says private program manager and team is the single point of accountability. So they will go out and source employees, contractors, community-based organizations who will find community-driven events, landowners, so we can get private property and long-term stewards, and then also potentially some more funding so we can fund things that we can't pay for with drainage infrastructure. So more details, it's going to be really exciting. We get lots of benefits out of our 25 acres of GSI. It's one contract, one unit price, includes all the benefits, and plenty of opportunity to everyone that's local. We want to keep the dollars local. We want it to be community centered. And Karen, back to you.
I want to thank my panelists, my fellow panelists, for sharing all those wonderful projects and specific examples and sharing lessons learned and recommendations for how to do it right, how to really let the community members identify what their priorities are and what they want to see done. And it is, I think, we'll all be working on communication and getting the word out and listening and hearing well into our 90s. So it was, I was thinking about this a lot when I was listening to Tony and Tim in the last session. So so I think the take home really is build partnerships to be successful, and that we'll all win when we work together.
Thank you again to our wonderful panelists here. Does anyone have a question here on the floor before I ask mine?
Hi, we've got a question from the live stream from Heidi Siegelbaum, and I think this is probably directed to Karen. In the context of our shared work, how can we take preliminary steps to develop a biophilic cities initiative that supports trees, nature, and housing along with thoughtful design?
Thanks, Heidi. That's a great question. And it was actually my question. So when Angela contacted me and asked me to talk about biophilic design, I basically submitted an abstract that said, I don't really have any answers. I have a lot of questions. And sort of an idea that we could be doing this better, and what's keeping us from doing this better, what's broken, what's, how can we still be in Tacoma in an environment where all development is good development? And if we keep building, eventually something will be affordable. Because I don't know how to reset the thinking, especially when we just had a big planning and zoning process that went that really in my view, didn't go where we needed it to go. So, so good question, and love to hear other people's ideas.
Maybe from an institutional perspective, Pam or Shelley. I don't know if that's on the radar of the city. Anyone's using that language there.
Green infrastructure design is biophilic design from my perspective. So shout out to the landscape architects. I was glad to hear the landscape architecture getting a plug earlier. Yeah, that's kind of our bread and butter. So we may not use that languaging, but it's definitely part and parcel to the design work that we do. Yeah, we call it maybe nearby nature, something a little, yeah, just different words for, I think, really similar concepts.
Yeah, and we love that. I think that and I love, I think that we have a lot of cities and counties in our region that are doing a fantastic job of taking more steps forward. It's frustrating to live in a place that is letting people cut corners and not provide any stormwater treatment at all for large projects that increase traffic. So when the opening remarks that my fellow panelists asked me to say were about, this is new, we're the enterprise of public works was, rooted in building roads. Building treatment plants came in the 70s after, after one big Clean Water Act passed, and we are still figuring out how to best develop and incorporate these good concepts in every project. There really shouldn't be any exceptions. Because every place you walk is going to have people that are either sweltering in the heat or just wanting a connection to nature.
Just to quickly add, I also think it requires us to start looking at things in a very holistic manner instead of siloing. This is a water quality project. This is a plant project. This is a community. We really need to start looking holistically, and we need to be reaching out to the other organizations that may have a different view than, how we view things. But the only way we're going to really move that needle is to be collaborative and reaching across, I hate to say it, the aisle, but we need to do that if we're going to make a difference.
Well said.
Is there time for one more question? Or should we wrap it up? Okay, I guess that concludes the panel. Thank you, everyone.